welcome back. Welcome back to after the break. Hope you enjoy your coffee and we are ready to start the next topic. So, as next point in our agenda, we want to talk about role-based access control with LDAP-S. So role-based access control is one key element of the defense in depth for cybersecurity. Let us assume again you have your inbuilt, hardened and protected device, and now you have the door in the wall to access the device with tools like WebUI or Dixie, for example. And in a substation you have a lot of them. Now we have the people who want to work with depends on the role they have. So to protect the access, your guardian needs a list of the people and the credential or the password of the people. So this access list is also needed for all the device and will be maintained because password change, user role change, user change. So that is not a practical solution. The solution is a central management of the user access. When someone wants to connect to the device, your guardian will talk with the central management by sending a request with username and password. And the central management sends a response, including the role of this user if he is authorized. This easily explains the magic behind airbag. The way the message is sent and the encryption of the message can be different. Most common name for this protocol are Radius. Radius is the most convenient or deployed protocol for small device, traditionally IT switch, and so where only the user and password is encrypted in the message with pre-shared keys. And LDAP. LDAP, the Lightweight Directory Access Protocol, is a much more convenient in the IT world for user, server, PCs. The advantage is that the complete message exchange can be encrypted with server authentication via TLS using certificate signed by a trusted CA. Access control. Also remember a main principle of OT. Availability is much more important. What if the connection to the Active Directory server is not working? First, you have the possibility to define a second Active Directory server. Most of the time, it is a good practice to have a so-called RODC or read-only domain controller, a regular copy of the maintained user list inside the substation. Second measure is that your device can cache the already logged user when LDAP server is available. And the third, last measure is to set an emergency user with all the permission. How to configure airbag with Dixie? As usual, under the menu Safety and Security. First feature is operational safety and access control. After having configured the first or primary server with CAs and search base according to the structure in the Active Directory server, the backup server can be engineered. User cache is already activated by default. And finally, you also can set the emergency account here with Dixie 5. Let us go now more in detail what the standard IEC 62351-8 have defined for to avoid different implementation between the OT device provider. LDAP is an abbreviation for Lightweight Directory Access Protocol, and as the name suggests, it is in the core a list of directory entities where each element store defines attribute of them. The generic workflow is that first the client specifies the element it needs to authenticate through a search string with a specific dialect. Normally, the specific element that is searched by the client is a user the client wants to authenticate with credentials. This process is called binding in LDAP. After a successful binding operation, then the client queries for the role information that the device needs. The second step is receiving role information. It is a little bit different than normal IT world practice, and the mechanism is fully specified in IEC 62351. To fetch the role information of a user, the client first fetches the user certificate attribute of the user. In this particular property, the user, there should be a binary certificate where the user role details are encoded. According to IEC 62351 extensions, the role details are stored in a list minimum mandatory 3 criteria. The first criteria is a user role, of course, and is represented as an integer for a predefined user role in IEC 62351. In example, for engineer role, the value is 2, is defined. Besides these roles, definition of extra role is possible with a range of -1 to -32,000. Then the second criteria that the client needs to know is the area of responsibility, abbreviated as AOR field. This defined in which access criteria that this role is restricted to. It's a string value, and as shown in the example, it can be either local or remote or both. The last criteria is a revision criteria. The integer value 0 is a revision of the year 2011, and the value 1 is a revision of year 2020 of the IEC 62351-8 standard. In SIPROTEC 5, both revisions are supported. Then the access tokens are prepared for a given role. They are encoded in XY09 user certificate and signed by a certificate authority that the organization trusts for the user roles. When the next time device connects to an LDAP server, it will fetch this particular certificate from the target user, verify the certificate signature against the certificate authority, decode the access token from the certificate, and authorize the user according to the role received from it. To have communication security of the connection, the IEC standard said please use TLS with server authentication. LDAP server in this application is required to have server certificate signed by the certificate authority that the organization and also the SIPROTEC 5 device trusts. In this case, the session will be encrypted and protected against various attack vectors that can come from outside of the substation. For the demo, we use SIPROTEC 5 simulated in the digital twin. User managed centrally within a Microsoft Active Directory using the secure protocol LDAP-S. I will first show you how to log into the device via the web UI remotely and then locally in front of the device with an on-site operation panel. In the second step, I will configure LDAP in SIPROTEC 5 with Dixie5. And finally, we will take a look in the IT environment to set a new user in the Active Directory and create the user certificate with Cyclem Grid Pass. The most convenient tool to create certificate according to IC 62351-8. Let us see how to log into a device. This device we simulate with digital twin. Again, SIPROTEC digital twin looks like that. We have a digital twin as a cloud application with a browser. We select under register device list the device to be simulated. We click on the button Start Simulation and click on the tile Device. So we have a SIPROTEC 5 relay to be used like a real device. You can use it not only for testing protection feature, but also to check the cybersecurity functions. But before we log in, let us see if our administrator have configured user in the Microsoft Active Directory as LDAP server. Yes, perfect. He activates the Windows server as Active Directory with lightweight directory services. Here we have one or more users, for example the user James, already configured with a role certificate, with a user certificate having the role security administrator. Let's go to the web UI of SIPROTEC 5. We enter in the browser HTTPS with the IP of the device and with the port 4443. The login window appears. We enter the username James and the password as set in the central Active Directory from our IT and click on Validate. We see that we are logged as user James with a role SecAdmin. We do not have access to some engineering roles related function like operation logs, for example. Let us take a look how airbag is in front of the device is solved. We go back to the digital twin where the local HMI is simulated. The device has a display and a numerical keyboard. We click on the login button. We navigate with the button up and down to the predefined user for local HMI. Select the username viewer having the same predefined role. We enter the numerical code as defined in the central Active Directory for the predefined user viewer. In the background, the SIPROTEC 4 receives the certificate and of this local HMI user, and now only the read permission according to the viewer roles are enabled. Let us navigate inside with the down button to the protection settings. So with the role viewer, we cannot change settings. That is a perfect realization of need to know cybersecurity principle. We see how easy it is for a user according to this role to log in a device with a central defined username either by the web UI or the front of the device. As next step, we will see how to configure the SIPROTEC device. Let's look in Dixie project. Each individual device has a central place for the cybersecurity related feature. We go to Safety and Security again, go to the first entry, Operational Safety and Access Control. Activate the airbag with LDAP feature. Select the TLS connection CA for the TLS encrypted LDAP connection between SIPROTEC and the LDAP server. You need the CA that signs the certificate of the LDAP server. When the LDAP server forwards the certificate, SIPROTEC 5 can also check if the certificate is now in SIPROTEC 5 certification authority repository. And as next, select the user root CA in the drop-down menu. That must be the CA that used to issue the user certificate. And under search base, you have to enter the path of the hierarchical structure as defined in the RSCF for LDAP by starting with the lower level with the organization unit, here called IC 62341 group, and the DC level or the domain controller called in our Active Directory here SIPROTEC test. And finally, we enter the IP address of the Active Directory server as primary server. And for availability reason, you can additionally configure as secondary server. Then right-click on the device level and select Load Security Settings to the device. The connection from Dixie PC to SIPROTEC 5 will be established. And now enter user and password. As user, you need the role SecAdmin or the Siemens Grid Security own role Siemens Admin. For example, let us use here James as SecAdmin. The Ethernet connection from the device to the Active Directory is okay, and the user is included in the Active Directory user group with a role ID according to IC 62341. The access control settings are successfully loaded to the device. So with Dixie 5 as well-known SIPROTEC 5 engineering tools, you also can easily set the LDAP configuration. Now the next topic is the creation of a new user in Active Directory and the creation of a user certificate in CCAM GridPass. This is not really the task for you as protection engineer, but let us nevertheless go through it in case in your organization you also have to manage the user certificate centrally. In the IT tool Microsoft Active Directory, we can add a new user in the organization unit called IC 62341 group. Make a right click and select new and click on user and enter a new username, for example Martin, and click to next. Enter the new password and click next. Click on properties, and under publish certificate we see that we can add a user certificate. For that, let us use the tool CyCam GridPass. CyCam GridPass is an ease-of-use public key infrastructure for OT according to IC 62341. We open the user interface with a browser and log in with username and password to the GridPass application. Our task is to create a certificate. We select the tile certificate to be guided in the creation workflow. The select button, add certificate. In the first step, we select the certificate profile called without extended key usage. And we go to step 2. Select in the drop-down the CA used to sign the user certificate, the so-called issuer CA. Remember, it's the same to select as you have configured in Dixie under user root CA. Enter the common name, CN, Martin, for example, same as it is in the Active Directory. And in the step 3, we assigned to the user, Martin, the role engineer from the drop-down list according to IC 62351-8 defined roles. We enter the area of responsibility with *: remote and click on plus. You will see the result in the certificate preview. and go to the next step, the step 4, to define the validity. Here you can select in a calendar the validity of the user certificate. By default, the long validity from the issuer CAs we use. It is up to you to reduce the validity in case, for example, the commissioning engineer is only intended to access to your IDs during this shorter period. Now you can either validate to create the user certificate or continue to the optional 2 next steps, only for curiosity about what assistance grid buses additionally provide. Let us take a look on step 5 and 6. Step 5, in case a CRL distribution point is used, CRL means certificate revocation list, you can configure it, and the best way is to select in the drop-down menu the entry automatic. Click and go to the last step with next. You can select in the drop-down between RSA and ECC, the algorithm for the encoding of the public and private key. And finally, click on Validate to create the certificate for Martin with the role engineer. You can easily find your certificate with a filter entry and then click on Export. We have 2 ways to add the certificate in the Active Directory. First one is automated over the LDAP protocol between SICAM Grid Bus and the Active Directory by entering the LDAP user using the name of the Windows server and password of the server. The second way is a manual export-import of the certificate. You then export as a .dar file and copy-paste to the Active Directory server file system and import with add from file to the corresponding user. And now you can log in to the device web UI using the user Martin, and you can see the difference between the 2 roles. Martin as engineer has access to general settings. James as security administrator has access to the security related settings. Now let's do it practically with a digital twin on my PC. So I need to restart my digital twin here with the button Start Simulation. So in the background the device will be restarted, and here when this is restarted the connection of our VPN will be established again. So during this time let us take a look on our configuration in Dixie. Under Safety and Security you have the operational safety and access control. As I explained before, you select role-based access control, and here under LDAP authentication you can select here in the drop-down the CA signed, where you signed the LDAP certificate for the LDAP secure communication, and here it could be also the same when you create your certificate, your user certificate with the same signed with the same CA. And in the search base you have to enter this special dialect with the organization unit, the domain controller within this syntax, and the IP address of the primary server. So let us take a look here in our Windows Server, log to this virtual machine. Here I have to type int. And now here you see that on this Active Directory system, you can see all the user and the computer. And the user, for example, we have here the user James. And in this user, you can find this published certificate, what we have created before with SICAM grid path, and assign it to this user. Here in this certificate, the user role, the area, and the revision information attributes are included. Okay, for the demonstration, here math is low, so the system is slow, and it start the simulation. So we can also see in our SICAM grid path the certificate. Here we have the complete list. Clear, we have to log in. And under certificates, for example, you can filter James and found here with this preview the attribute contained in this certificate for the user James. You can find here under area of transportability the role, secadmin, and the IOR string. Okay, finally our device is started. So normally I can log to it. Yes, so the connection over VPN is working. So that's okay. Now I can, with Dixie, I can load this configuration to the device by selecting here and right-click, load security setting to device. And now, because I want to activate role-based access control, when Dixie loads this configuration to the device, he will ask me for a user that is already known in the Active Directory. So I need now to enter, for example, the user what we know here, my James with a password defined. Click on OK. Okay, I think I have entered the wrong password, sorry, again. Let's secure settings. Cancel OK, and then again. Okay, green, successful load security configuration to the device. And normally, to remember what is syslog, you will also see the last logging information. For example, you see there a little bit more detail that the LDAP authentication has been activated, and EST, and a little bit more detail, but only the detail what you need to be sure that this is all only warnings but not alerts. Okay, now if I go now back to my logging via the web UI, now I have to log with. I get a new Windows where I have to enter the username, for example, James, and the password. So with the same user I can log with the same roles from the web UI or from Dixie. And here you get now a little bit the message what is more precise, because we have role-based access control. We know now the message contained that it's the user James who have initiated a remote session with a role security administrator. Now you can really identify with role-based access control the user and his role in the syslog message. Okay, so let's go back to our slides. In summary, for this main topic, role-based access control is simple to activate. Our device needs only the IP of the Active Directory server and the search base. And because it's secured via TLS, you need the CA pattern to validate or to trust the certificate from the LDAP server. Airbag with LDAP is basic for cybersecurity for subsession protection and automation system. Attacker access are blocked after a certain number of unsuccessful logging. It is possible to have high availability due to the 3 fallback measures: the backup server, cached user, and emergency user. That UI is recommended in the IEC 62443 and the IEC 62351-9 defines the protocol like LDAP secured by TLS and the role to improve the interoperability.